You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Happy Wednesday, ladies and gents. This podcast is brought to you by my company, OMD Ventures. It's my platform focused on everything human capital investing. And if you don't know what that means, then that's a great reason to go check it out. I have links to the newsletter that you can subscribe to, as well as the general company site down below in the descriptions. Not to mention the link to my vlog that I've recently started. I'm still new at it, but if you are curious about what I'm doing and what really goes on in my, I guess, relatively boring week, definitely look into tune in and follow along on the journey. I've also attached a link to my listener survey, and so if you are a true fan, or if you want to be a true fan that really wants to contribute, something else you can do on top of leaving a nice 5-star review on iTunes is to go fill out the listener survey to constantly give me feedback on how I can improve, or things you like about the podcast, etc. And so yeah, that's practically it. And so for today, our guest is Larry Lau, the founder of 88 Ventures. 88 Ventures is a venture studio in Toronto and London, Ontario, that helps entrepreneurs build digital products with the help of an in-house development team. Larry described it pretty well when he told me that it's practically like a CTO that's a whole studio on its own for entrepreneurs who may need help with creating their products into something even better than what they currently have in their, I guess, MVP level. Though he runs a venture studio that develops technical products, Larry really started out as an entrepreneur in digital marketing. His foray in entrepreneurship began with building a globally ranked top Pokemon community site that later got acquired by IGN. Yet he didn't really pursue his next venture till much later after graduating and nearly even getting kicked out of university, that we kind of talk about deeper in the podcast, because he had this medical science stream. And he decided to leave that on the past and start a marketing agency. And then after that, he's become an angel investor and now a venture founder who's just focused on helping startups and really just creating brands and experiences and really just combining everything. This was really an extremely fun episode, and given how gangster this guy is, like when you just look at the kind of journey he's been through, we just couldn't cover the full story. I felt that we definitely would need to do a follow-up in the near future, and if Larry's down, I definitely want to dig deeper into his current ventures and more about what he's doing. But until then, I think you will definitely have a complete earful listening to his really fascinating journey into where he got to where he is now. So without further ado, please enjoy my chat with Larry Lau. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today on the podcast, we have Larry Lau. Hey Larry, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Larry here is the founder of 88 Ventures. And so Larry, for our audience members, can you tell us a little more about 88 Ventures, where you guys really predominantly based out of, and what you really do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So 88 Ventures is a venture studio. Essentially, what we do is we invest into early stage companies by providing software services in lieu of capital. So in some ways, we kind of look at it as we're an alternative investment vehicle, similar to early stage pre-seed venture capital firm. So what happens is there are a lot of individuals with lots of great ideas, but they struggle with the technology piece. For example, someone may come up with an idea and then they'll find like a co-founder. It could be a neighbor, it could be a friend or some type of relative, but that individual may not necessarily have the expertise to be able to build a commercially viable software platform. The other challenge is someone may have some capital and they'll hire an agency, but those agencies are looking to do more fee for service. So they don't necessarily have the entrepreneur or the startup in mind, or their best interest in mind. So if Daniel, you said you wanted to build a product as an agency, for the most part, they would just say, okay, we'll build that. They don't really think about, is this a critical feature for your MVP? What are the use cases, business cases? If you said, I want all these bells and whistles, they'd be happy to quote you and charge you for that. So essentially, our model is we're acting as more of the CTO and really acting as a co-founder for these early stage companies. So not only are we responsible for building the actual platform and the product, but we also challenge the entrepreneurs in terms of understanding why do we need this feature, how critical is it, can this be delayed, or we need to actually change the flow, or we actually need to better understand the customer before we actually build out and invest all this time to build out a certain feature, or we need to adjust the workflow before we actually go through with it. So our model is unique in the sense that these early stage companies that would have raised money and they're raising money and they would be giving up a piece of their company or whatever it is, they still have to hire or manage the team and hopefully build a product that will actually work. So we come in, we're essentially eliminating that whole process where someone may have a validated idea, but what we can do is work with them and build out an MVP or early commercial version. And then from there, we can help them and be part of that process to help them scale. One of the key things that people ask us is, what does it look like after you build the product? So even from the conversation that I had earlier today with a VC firm was they were curious because as a VC, they wouldn't actually want to invest in a company where where on their cap table, a third-party agency would have anywhere between 20 to 40% equity because they don't want that to be outsourced. But our positioning on that is that we actually are more of the co-founder. So this is what I mentioned earlier. So for us, we're helping build a platform. We can help them get some early stage scale, maybe get them to $20,000, $30,000 monthly recurring revenue. But other software companies would actually have to, in many cases, replatform because they can't sustain the growth. But what we can do is we can essentially build a product from the get-go that can actually get to $20,000, $30,000 in MRR, but we can also still use that same platform to scale to $100,000. Just because we're using best practices, we're not creating like all this ugly code. Like we have a team of like senior developers based in London, Ontario. So that's where our development office is based. We're able to build commercially viable products that are actually really good.
Yeah. I feel like it depends on, I guess, my listeners, but my initial thought was, $20,000-$30,000 in MRR, that's not a small number. Mm-hmm. Like it's, there are plenty of small businesses out there that may not even make that kind of money. And so from your experience, do you find that like certain entrepreneurs, like they don't want to go past that? Like, and is that kind of a criteria though of like, do you only take on entrepreneurs that want to exceed that completely and then take it to like the next level where it's like hundreds of thousands or even millions in MRR?
I would say that if a startup is able to exceed about $10,000 monthly recurring revenue, that's the first indication that they have some validation. Typically, the companies that we would be interested in looking at would be a company that may not necessarily have $10,000 in monthly recurring revenue, but they have some level of consistent like validation. So one of our recent investments, they were doing about $4,000 to $5,000 when we first started working with them. We're now in our beta phase of the platform that we invested and developed for them, and now their monthly recurring revenue has grown to about $15,000.
Wow.
And that's just a start. Like if you're looking at any type of like venture math startup, you're looking at like crazy like hundreds of thousands of dollars of monthly recurring revenue. But even then, like a lot of the early stage companies, if they're able to get to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, that's when they're going to gain interest from seed or pre-seed or seed stage institutional investors.
Yeah, and so then it seems like when you decide to take an entrepreneur, you expect them to have revenue already. So is that because you said you come in kind of as like a CTO role? Does that mean that the entrepreneur would already have found a way to at least create some kind of, I guess, technology-based product, and then you refine it or like completely rejig it, or how would that work?
There's different scenarios.
Okay.
So one of them could be that, for example, the company that I was just talking about, they made it perceived as they are a software platform, but they've been actually operating the whole business entirely manually. So essentially, this company is called Maestro, and it's for easy for being referencing like how do I want to describe this? For lack of a better reference, we'll use that. We'll say that it's the Uber for music teachers.
Got it.
Essentially, as a parent, if you wanted to find a music teacher, you're going to have to go to Craigslist, you're going to have to go to Kijiji, and then there's always like this scheduling coordination. There's a payment side that's kind of awkward sometimes. Essentially, Maestro is able to eliminate that whole process, and we're able to match make for parents that are looking for teachers for their kids. It's not a open directory type of platform. So parents aren't able to say, I'm in London or Toronto and I want this specific teacher. You actually put in the criteria, you put in the availability, you put in what are you trying to learn or what you're trying to gain out of it. And then based on our algorithm, we have all this different metadata and different data points. We're going to provide 3 options for you based on the criteria that you've set. And then we'll also, on our end, also consider what are the reviews or what are the ratings. So good teachers are actually incentivized to because as they're teaching more students, they get strong reviews, they're going to be populated and displayed more often than other people that wouldn't be.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And so then how many companies do you have in your, I guess, venture studio right now?
So we have 2 products that are actually launched, and we are working on 2 separate other individual products. So most recently, one of the challenges that we've been facing for 88 is entrepreneurs love our model. A lot of people that I've talked to, they would say to me, I wish I knew about you 6 months ago or 1 year ago, because they just started building their product, or they had to re-platform and they raised money and then they had to hire their own team, or they had to outsource it. For the challenge that we've had is, or I don't want to say challenge, but the obstacle that I've been facing is when we're talking to potential investors or VCs that we're interested in working with to potentially create a larger fund so that we can just go crazy and invest into like 20, 30 different companies. It is very labor intensive compared to traditional venture capital. A VC might see an opportunity if they focus on pre-seed, they like the entrepreneur, they like the idea, there's market fit, it's defensible, they just write a check. Our model is we actually have to do that same process, but now we also are responsible for building the product. So just from that main difference, it's very labor intensive for us, both in mentoring the entrepreneur as well as understanding like what is the product and how do we build it versus, oh, here's some money, like talk to us in 90 days. So that's been one of the first obstacles that we've been facing, that now I can understand why this model doesn't really exist, but we're willing to take on that challenge. But so that's the first challenge that we face. And then the other second challenge that we're facing is when we're trying to have conversations with investors and VCs about potentially raising like our own individual fund, or there are different vehicles or models where we can get capital injection to accelerate this. They love the model, but because we only have 2 companies that we invest into, like we're pretty early stage. We're considered a startup that invest and build startups, right? So there's a lot of complexities and challenges there. So one of the things that we're kind of waiting for our companies to mature so that we can essentially demonstrate that we have a track record and portfolio of companies that we've built and are also successful. Like for me personally, maybe I'm a bit biased, but the companies that we have are doing very well, but it does take time for those companies to mature and then increase their monthly recurring revenue. And then they also need to go raise money. So until they actually raise money at X valuation, 88 doesn't really have anything that's tangible to say our portfolio companies were able to successfully raise X value in subsequent rounds after we built and helped them. So that's one of the larger obstacles that we've been facing. Is not so much can our companies get there, but it's literally just a matter of waiting for our companies to mature so that we can essentially be part of that process. So one of the key things that we've been able to do is actually invest and build our own internal products. So when we invest into companies, there are also inherent challenges where we're working with a founder or a founding team, and there are not so much challenges, but essentially, if we wanted to move fast, we can move fast, but then we're also, the bottleneck would be based on the team. We may have ideas or recommendations, but again, we're kind of making those decisions with the entrepreneurs and all that kind of stuff. So for us as well, as when we're investing into a lot of these early stage companies, a lot of them aren't super innovative. What I mean by that is they may have found a certain market and they may have found a niche solution, but it's not anything like super crazy. So it's easy for us to build those products, but because for me personally, we have such a strong technical team, I've been really challenging our model recently in terms of are we building the most emerging product, the most innovative product? Yes, we can create niche solutions and niche products, but are we really riding the wave of certain trending technologies? For example, cannabis, but that's not really technology, but blockchain, machine learning. There's privacy is a huge thing because of all the stuff that's been going on in social media. So are we building products or companies that are fitting within those trends and those hypes where we're generating a lot of attention? So most recently, what we've been focusing on is building our own internal products while we're waiting for our two existing launches and there are two other companies that we've invested or we've committed to. While we're waiting for them to mature, we've also allocated a lot of our attention and resources to building products and solutions in the automatic speech recognition space.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff. But at the same time, I think it's kind of suiting because I was kind of doing a bit of the math when I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, and I counted you've practically been an entrepreneur yourself for close to 10 years now, mm-hmm. running different kinds of companies, and it's also, I guess, somewhat fitting that you need it. And I'm sure people who are familiar with venture capital firms also know that most venture capitalists are people who have founded companies because they can empathize and they also understand it. Mm-hmm. And so you started your entrepreneurial journey in the digital marketing space, despite running a studio right now that focuses on the technical and CTO side. But I think if I were to take the kind of move the clock back further, you talked when we first met, you mentioned how you were born and raised in London, Ontario, and your initial thought, or I guess even dream, was to go to med school and be a doctor.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There is that, I think, common stereotype / bias, quote unquote, that if you're from a Asian background, that your parents want you to be a doctor or something. Was that the kind of pressure that you had, or did you have some other reasons why you just had this dream of going to med school when you're in high school?
I think in high school, I love sports. So one of the things that I was very passionate about was kinesiology and sports medicine. So Kobe Bryant, you tore your meniscus, no problem, I'll stitch it back together. So I ended up going to Western for kinesiology, but first year university just absolutely kicked my butt. So my parents actually never thought that I would be able to go to med school. So really? Very different from the stereotypical pressure. My parents thought, if you want to try it, go ahead. But after first year, I proved them right. I think in high school I was able to get good grades and play sports, and but I never really had the academic discipline to study effectively. So after first year, I was very close to getting kicked out of university because I was I had such terrible grades.
Was that just because you were partying too hard because you were in Western?
No, absolutely not. So I was living off campus and living at home as well. So if I was to, it took me like an hour just to bus to school. And if it was like, if I had a car, it would have been like 20 minutes. But just transportation in London is not the best. Probably much like anywhere else, like Toronto, and like the commutes and stuff is not ideal. So no, I wish I could say that and say that I had a great time while I got kicked out or almost got kicked out, but that was not the case.
Yeah, and so after kinesiology, you ended up switching into psychology. It's funny though because I don't know if I told you this when we first met, but you know that I graduated in accounting in Waterloo. But in my first year, I was in a program that I had no business being in because I had no business background. Like I had no idea what accounting even was. I just went in because it resembled business. Like I picked accounting because I wanted to be an engineer, and I got accepted into engineering, but I just made a last minute switch effort. And so first year accounting was kicking my ass at that point, and I looked to kinesiology. I was actually going to transfer into kinesiology. Like I had my application all ready to just transition over, but I didn't end up doing it. But yeah, because I was so into powerlifting, and I thought, yeah, like maybe kinesiology is like my thing. But it's just funny that you went into kinesiology with that kind of sports mindset, though. And so then you went into psychology, but I think what was also very interesting was you told me how you started creating websites when you're like 12 years old, and you made like a Pokemon website that you even got partnered with like IGN, with like the International Gaming Network.
Yeah.
Were you like always fascinated in like technology and stuff as a child? Like what made you like create that kind of website?
I think in some ways I was always like very curious, and I actually no, I've always been curious, and I still am curious now with different businesses and different technologies and reading about different things. Like I just love to learn. I think when I was 12, I was trying to learn. Like my family just got our first computer, and I was trying to fiddle around with it. And I came across Angel Fire, GeoCities, and there's like Asian Avenue or something like that. But you essentially were able to learn, like I was able to learn basic ways to code. And then just because the internet was accessible, I was trying to self-teach myself like how to build a website. So by no means was I like an incredible developer or a coder, but I was able to teach myself basic HTML, and then I started learning about tables, and then that I could actually structure like a decent looking website. So that was probably when I was like 11, and then I built this Pokemon website, which was essentially like different information and walkthroughs and tips for Pokemon, like the game. And then how I got really lucky was I had individuals from different countries that wanted to send me content. So someone from Japan would message me and say, "Oh, I just went to E3, and I took this photo, like this new game or this new screenshot of Pokemon Silver that like existed, but like in the States there was only red and blue." So I was like, okay, cool, like I'll post that. And then someone from Germany will have like some type of Pokemon and Nintendo event, and they're like, "Oh, I want to share this with you." So I stumbled across user-generated content at a very early stage.
Yeah, like you're 13 or something, and you're managing like a platform. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, so I was able to get all this user-generated content and start publishing that, and that was how I was able to build up a pretty reputable website. So I think at the peak, I was the 5th largest website like in the world. And then when I was about 14, 15, I was going into high school, and I didn't really have the passion for maintaining a Pokemon website. Now I kick myself for not keeping it, but I think going back to certain stereotypes, like you watch American movies, and like the nerdy Asian dude would get beat up and put in lockers. So that actually, unfortunately, was one of the reasons why I didn't want to keep it. So and also at the same time, because I'm not super technical, managing the server side and the DevOps was actually quite challenging. So at the time, like almost 20 years ago, bandwidth was extremely expensive. At one point, it cost me about over $100 US to keep my site up for an hour. in terms of like the amount of traffic and all that stuff. So being able to scale the website was also very challenging. So by the time that I got to that point, I was able to find a provider that would help me host the website if I put up their ads. And then they said that I was growing too much and growing too fast, that they wouldn't be able to accommodate our growth. So then they made an introduction to this company that called UGO, which was purchased by IGN. So they essentially had all these like media websites, and they would essentially take over our site and take over the ads and then help scale it. And then I was able to get like a 1% like revenue share. So I got rid of the site and they gave me like a 1% revenue share, which equated to $150 to $200 US like every month. So when I look back on it, they were making like 20 grand off of me a month. So if I had the knowledge and the foresight, like I would have been able to have my first quote unquote exit when I was 14.
Yeah. Like in case someone from IGN is listening, I don't want to talk any smack about the company, but oh man, I got 14 years got totally taken advantage of by some like massive conglomerate for sure.
And my mom had to sign the contract because I wasn't old enough.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah. And so you're an entrepreneur at such a young age, and so it's funny too because like you mentioned how you practically never really had like a full-time job in like the corporate world, because like after graduation, or it might have been like even during when you were in school, like you started your own digital marketing agency. Mm-hmm. So you end up going back to helping people like create websites and even like now growing it. How did that for you like starting? Like, was there some kind of click where you just realized as you were getting older that I have the skill but nobody else does, or people are just like not utilizing it properly? What happened?
It was towards the end of university where my first business partner, who I also went to high school with, we were both working at TD Canada Trust. So that would be like the closest I've ever had in terms of a corporate position, but we were working part-time as a teller. And essentially business owners would come to us and say, oh, like Larry, like you're super young. Do you know how to build a website?
Just like clients?
Yeah, clients. And I was essentially soliciting while working at TD Canada Trust. So my managers weren't very happy with that, but they also really loved me. So they kind of, it was a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, but you're making the client sticky, right? They're probably coming back to that TD branch just to talk to you more.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a few websites like cash deals, but we were building a website like using Notepad. Like it's not even Dreamweaver. Like we were hard coding websites, but we were charging like $300, $500. So how I started the marketing company was we realized that we're not developers and we're not going to be coders, and we're not going to be good at that. At the time, there was a lot of pure web development companies, and there were also branding agencies. Digital marketing at that time was considered black magic, like voodoo. Like, what is SEO and Google AdWords?
Yeah, what year was this around?
This was about 2011, 2012.
Okay, yeah.
So people were already doing Google AdWords for years. Like by the late 1990s, like the really, really progressive, like early adopters, they were already killing it. But e-commerce and everything was also not nearly as prominent. But essentially, it was like super new. And we decided that, okay, we found an opportunity where traditional agencies don't have the expertise for digital marketing. And then web development companies don't have that expertise. So we're going to build a marketing agency specializing in paid advertising and then search engine optimization. So that's how we got started, and we started working with local smaller businesses, but it was very hard at the beginning. So my family, I had a very modest upbringing. It's not like my parents had connections and they were able to refer clients. Like everything that I've been able to do from a business side has been established and like developed from like myself. And I would say that I was inherently introverted, but then I had to go out and do business deals, all types of stuff that I was never comfortable with. But at the beginning, it was very challenging. We were working with like local businesses, and people were very hesitant to give us any money to like manage their ads. They're like, oh, like you're some punk kid, and what is this digital marketing, online SEO stuff? So it took us a while to really build traction. We were doing projects for free. We were doing projects for like fractions of what our time was actually worth, but we had to build a reputation and build a portfolio. Like there's one business where it's a prominent restaurant in London. We built them a site and did digital marketing for them, and we got paid with gift cards. But this individual is super well known, well respected. So as we got into other meetings, we would say, "Oh, we worked with so and so, and we built this website." And then like, "Oh, I'm a big fan of them. Like I know them personally," and that also helped us get some like validation and credibility. So it took a really long time. I eventually, because digital marketing is so new, I was able to teach at financial college, teaching like a 1-day Google AdWords course. And then that also allowed me to go to Western University and teach in their graduate marketing program. So I created the first digital marketing focused curriculum for their graduate marketing program. So again, being able to be an instructor and teach at that level also added credibility for a company. So eventually we were able to work with some pretty well-known brands, both locally and also at a national level.
Yeah, like and it seems like I think you first started as like Lala Digital, was it Lala like Digital Group, and then that was like a year and a half, and then you transformed it into like a bigger company called like Atmos over time, right?
So,
which you ran for like close to 6 years.
Yeah, so Lala Digital is a funny story. So my business partner and we weren't able to get a lot of work locally in Canada and in London.
Yeah.
So for us to gain some traction and get experience, we went on like freelance.com and try to offer our services to different businesses. So there was one individual from Dallas, and he came across us, and we're not from like somewhere in Asia or like India, because that's where there's a lot of outsourced contractors. So he's like, "Oh, you guys are Canadian and you guys are super cheap, so I'll consider working with you guys." So we did like one project, and then we were able to connect and build a relationship with him. So Lala Digital was actually our company that we used to service all these American clients. And then we did that for like a little bit about over a year simultaneously as we're trying to grow Atmos. So then when we became more legitimate, we actually started working with this agency in Dallas as under the Atmos brand. And then they were selling contracts that they would outsource to us. So it was actually a really fun and really great experience. I was incredibly grateful for it. So yeah, at one point, Atmos, I would say when we were very early stage, probably half of our revenue came from like Dallas, Fort Worth area. So it's really random, but I'm actually very familiar with Dallas, Fort Worth because I've had the opportunity to travel there and understanding like the markets and like the different pockets of like San Antonio, Austin, and like there's like all these like Texas language that it's
wow. Yeah. And you're wearing a flannel shirt right now, so I was gonna say it's kind of fitting. Yes. But wow, so that's very surprising because when you're talking about you're sourcing local business and stuff, I was thinking, London, Ontario must have a thriving small business environment, but it's okay. I'm kind of getting the bigger picture now that you had like a big client base also in like the U.S. as well.
Yeah, because just in the States, I was able to see this like firsthand. They're way more aggressive. I used to use this analogy where if we had a great idea and we were in the States and we proposed it to John would be like, "How much is it going to cost?" "Okay, cool. Let's try that." In Canada, like digital marketing, when we're trying to tell someone like no one else is doing this, is like entirely like blue ocean, they're like, "Let me know when
someone else
Joe is doing it, and then I'll consider doing it." I think there's still some of that mentality here in Canada, not nearly as bad as it was before. So digital marketing was way more prominent. Like a lot of the companies that we were working with back in Dallas Fort Worth, 2 or 3 years later, we would see those trends or those type of companies show up in Canada. So it was really interesting to be able to see how the American market worked versus Canadian market.
Mm-hmm. But when you're first starting out, though, once you get that market validation, and I think at that point, then you know what you're doing works. But in the beginning, when you said how you're now transitioning from being teller soliciting business to now, okay, we've graduated. Do we build this as a company? Like, how long are we gonna do this for? With all these people saying no, because Canadians just don't get it. Like, what was that process like? How did you guys get the, I guess, confidence or any kind of like certainty that, or conviction, I would say, that this is going to be our company, this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to go find some corporate job and like all that. Like, what was that process like in the first like year and a half?
I would say that we both, my business partner and I, we had the luxury of just being recent graduates and being able to live at home. So not having mortgages or major expenses, we were able to kind of take this risk, and we both decided that, hey, we'll try this out and see where it goes. So originally we started in working out of his basement at his mom's place, and that was fun, but not very productive. Like, he had an Xbox, and like, I don't know, like 11 a.m. we're like, hey, you want to play like a quick game of Halo? And then there's like a mini putt, and we're like challenging each other. But we also decided that we needed to be more legitimate, especially when we were facing a lot of I guess, obstacles to be able to secure clients. So we, at that point, we were probably making a few $1,000s in revenue, but by no means and that wasn't like a lot of money. Like, it was probably like a few $1,000s after like a couple months, which is not a lot. But what we realized was maybe we need to be more legitimate. So we decided that we were going to get our first office in downtown London, Ontario.
And just how many months into starting the business?
That's a good question. I think we were so we started in May, and then I think we moved in the office around November of 2011. So maybe like 4 or 5 months. And we got a really, really small office. Like, I think it was 400 square feet, if not less. And we had no recurring revenue. We had our revenue and everything was going up and down. And we just decided that, hey, if we're going to have a space and we're going to have an office, then we have to be able to commit and pay for this. So,
pressure's on, yeah.
Yeah, pressure's on. So we built all our own furniture. It was probably totally against like the lease agreement. And yeah, that was a lot of fun, and have lots of great memories. Probably that was one of the best times in terms of startups. Like, I've been able to do a lot of different things, a lot of cool things, but I think that that period was probably one of the things I cherish the most, because not having coming from a business background, like everything that I learned now, like I do angel investing, we have like a complex venture model with 88. Everything that I've had to do in terms of corporate, legal, HR, leadership, technical, has literally been learned from scratch. And I would say those were the hardest years, but also the funnest.
Is there like a specific kind of moment where you think it kind of comes to mind to you frequently as, oh, this was a really hard time, like this was a big obstacle, and like, I guess I'm trying to ask, what was like the kind of biggest obstacle that kind of came to mind at that point where you thought, man, if I can get over this, then everything else is going to be smooth sailing. Like, I can, but I don't know if I can get over this.
I think it's all relative.
Yeah.
Because when we first started, we committed to this small lease, but we had maybe $1,000 in our bank account. And then we're like, oh, we have to pay this lease. That's like $700 a month or something like that. So at that time, like, we're like, oh shit, like we have to pay for this. And then we're worrying about like hundreds of dollars. But then as we grew and then we hired employees, and then we're like, oh crap, like we have to pay for employees, but we don't pay ourselves. And then you deal with certain issues. So I think it's from doing this for the last like 9 years, I think challenges and everything are always relative. So at that time, it seems like really hard because it's new, or for the most part, like if it's a new challenge, it seems hard at that point. But 3 or 6 months later, and you think back on it, and you're like, why did I even stress out about that, right? I think it's all relative, and I think as long as you're willing to challenge and willing to challenge yourself and willing to learn, then those situations happen. But I've learned that that's just part of part of entrepreneurship. So I have someone said to me like really good, like an amazing quote. The journey is the destination, or I think I may have butchered this.
I think I know what quote you're referring to, but yeah, I think it might go a little different way. But I know exactly what you're talking about. What is it? It's not the destination; it's the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's.
It's not.
I don't
not
think
that
that's. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's along those lines.
Yeah.
I have a reputation of butchering idioms.
No worries. I'm sure our audience kind of understands it. Like the focus is on the journey, and but it's funny. Like you kind of like brushed over this really quickly, but we went from you can't even pay the lease to and then we hired people. So I guess you started growing rapidly. Then like was that the period when you figured out this whole Fort Dallas Worth like in Dallas, like Fort Worth, like this whole situation where you realize there's this huge pool of companies that need help, and that's when you decided to like, scale up?
We definitely needed to hire because we were getting more clients in from Dallas Fort Worth and area, but we also were concerned about being too reliant on being an outsourced company because all they could do is bring it in house or hire someone else, and then if we were to hire someone, then we're really at risk of that. But we did. I wouldn't say we were growing rapidly. I think in our first year we hired 2 employees, but both my business partner and I, we were focused on paying them and not paying ourselves. I think it was in the second full year of us running this business, we had I think 4 or 5 employees, and then we were able to kind of pay ourselves like a reasonable, like very extremely modest salary or income. Like we had no consistency. It was kind of like, oh, we haven't paid ourselves in 4 months. Like maybe we have some extra money in the bank. We'll cut a check for ourselves, right?
Yeah, like it's nothing like a bi-weekly paycheck at all.
No, there's no. And when I realized that, I was like, my employees are getting paid bi-weekly. There's like CPP and EI. I was like, what is this bullshit? But it wasn't until I would say the 3rd year into this where we started really feeling confident and comfortable with the business, because as we were like, I was personally like teaching, we were guest speaking at multiple events, we were running workshops, like we became the player in our city for being young guys, super hardworking, like we had a great reputation, so we were able to attract big projects. So it wasn't like the 3rd and 4th year were like the best years. So we won Business of the Year in London, Ontario. We were getting different accolades. Like we're winning projects that we probably shouldn't have been winning. So that was a lot of fun.
And then you went further and you started. I think you guys merged with Northern Commerce.
We merged with a local software development shop, and because we did have 2 developers, but they're focused on more like building brochure websites. So we merged with a software company so that we could actually build more complex products. So we merged and then became Northern Commerce. So then with I think at the time there was 20 like hardcore developers, like a couple engineers. Then we were able to enter like software as a service or build up custom modules for basic websites, but have like really cool features where like maybe like something like geolocation, like on a traditional like WordPress website, because we're building websites for companies that have multiple locations, it wouldn't necessarily, like we didn't have the capabilities to build a geolocator. But because now we have a software team, then we're able to build a geolocator for your closest franchise or your closest location. So that essentially became the inception of Northern Commerce. So then we were able to focus on enterprise e-commerce development. And then also because we were the marketing side, we were able to service these very large direct-to-consumer or business-to-business e-commerce platforms.
Okay, now I'm seeing where like the whole technical side came in for 88 Ventures, where you did see that when you were building up Northern Commerce.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so how big was Northern Commerce like up to the point that you left the company?
So I left the company about just over 2 years ago, and at the time we were about 45 full-time employees, from developers, marketers, designers.
And how much in revenue were you guys doing around that time? If you can't share, that's totally cool.
Yeah, I don't think I can share that.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
But definitely like multi-million.
Yeah. Okay, that's
I think that's
good enough.
I think that's can assume that people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good enough. Yeah. That gives definitely like I think a range of got it. And so then, what made you leave though? It's a company that you founded, and it's where one of your fondest memories are of growing that marketing company. But what made you want to transition out now of Northern Commerce and actually go back to school, and you ended up doing a executive MBA at Ivy?
Yeah, I think there were a few different reasons for it. I think one of the things was that I learned from that whole process was, so I would say that there are a few different reasons for why I left the company. So one of them was when we merged with the software development company. We were both very fast growing. We were both young, but I didn't really understand like what merging meant. Had I kind of gone back on this, like maybe I would have done something different. But essentially, as we were able to work more closely, there were differences in terms of like business direction or different things that we would be wanting to do. So me being one of two founders, there were certain responsibilities that I was able to take on. But as we merged, then some of those responsibilities and things I enjoyed were no longer like under my like wheelhouse. So as we had a bigger machine and we're doing, like, one of my focuses on more business development, and it became in some ways like very stale, especially when we're doing enterprise e-commerce sales. The business life cycle, the sales cycle could be anywhere between like 12 months to like 2 years.
Wow.
So as we were growing and doing well, I had started investing into other early stage companies, and I had a way higher enjoyment, and I was more excited working on these companies where I was able to help build them and have a larger influence. And it was exciting to see where they're going. So with Northern, it was challenging because we had this larger machine. The things that I was enjoying that I wanted to do weren't really part of my responsibility anymore. So that would be like, those were like the big reasons. I really wanted to focus on like building products, but we were an agency and we're doing a lot of fee for service. So again, like there's not the excitement where we can actually bring that in-house, right? So for like a variety of reasons, that I felt that it was time to leave. And then at the same time, I was also trying to think like, okay, I have all this experience, but I don't have a formal business background. Something that really interests me is venture capital, or maybe some level of like investment banking or corporate development. So because I don't have like a very good business education, I decided that I would apply and try to do my executive MBA just to round myself out. And I was fortunate to get in at Ivy Business School and completed the program and graduated last fall.
Also, you ran 88 Ventures while you were in your MBA.
Yeah, okay. I was. So when I left Northern Commerce, I always had this kind of idea in terms of investing into different companies and creating like a machine that was able to do that. So that essentially was the creation of 88 Ventures. So at that early, like one of the things about 88 that we haven't been able to touch on is we have a very unique way of investing into different companies. So early stage products, a lot of these companies have a lot of the same features. For example, every software product needs to be able to allow user registration, login, payment processing, email notifications. When an individual team is trying to build a product, they're building the company from the ground up. So they're running into all the same issues. They're trying to build like the login module from scratch. What we've been able to do at 88 is, we created a framework that allows us to now build software products much more quickly. So certain features like user management, payment processing, something that would have taken 20 or 30 hours to do from scratch, we created modules that allows us to reuse and repurpose them into multiple products. So something that could take X amount of hours will take us like 20, 30 minutes to implement. So when we're looking at different companies that we're building or investing into, let's just say it's going to cost, or it's going to take 1,000 hours. We probably have like 400 hours of that scope already completed. So now we have the advantage of being able to bring our products to market much more quickly. And then from our standpoint, we're essentially able to create that value because something that would have taken X amount of hours, we're able to eliminate that. So in some ways, we're able to offer a better value for our investors, because when we're investing into the companies, we're providing it at the market competitive rate, a competitive market rate. So when we say we're going to invest $100,000 of services, that's not $100,000 in equivalent wages. It's $100,000 if you were to get that quoted from a third-party agency. But for us, for our investors, and even as 88, our actual cash output for that investment would maybe be $50,000. Let's just say that if we were a fee for service and we had 15% margin, that's how we're looking at our investments, right? So for our investment thesis for 88 is, okay, we're going to provide $100,000 of in-kind services, and our cost is whatever fraction of that. But as the company is able to increase value in terms of their valuations, then our cost wasn't $100K, but it's realized at $100K. But if they're able to now raise, let's just say, at a $2 million valuation, which is relatively low for a pre-seed or seed stage company, on paper, our $50,000 investment now is maybe equivalent to $500K if we had like 25% equity, right? So on paper, we're able to 10x our original investment.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
but as an angel investor, if you wanted to invest, that's $100,000 that you had put out. We're actually able to increase the value of the capital that we use by turning capital into services.
And so then right now for 88 Ventures, is the venture studio also funded by other investors, or is it mainly just purely funded by your own money?
So for the first year and a half, it was primarily funded by myself, and then also by a few different government grants that we were able to get. And then last year, towards the end of last year, I was trying to create this special purpose vehicle that we were going to use to invest into a select few companies. But over time, as I realized that creating an SPV to invest into these different companies was not ideal for a number of reasons. So again, one of them is we're having to continue to mentor the entrepreneurs. We're having to build different features, retooling features. It wasn't as clean as, hey, we're going to provide $100,000 in services. So we actually, the companies that we invested into, opposed to just cutting them off of, let's just say, Maestro, for example, instead of saying, hey, we can't help you anymore because we've already fully committed to your 100K, I realized that we're setting ourselves up for failure because we aren't providing them that extra support, or they need that extra feature, but it's out of scope. So when I created the SPV, it was very okay, we're always only going to commit to 100K per company, and that's it. And then good luck, let's see where it goes. And for a number of reasons that we've encountered, it actually doesn't make a lot of sense, because if we just let that company go, it probably has a higher likelihood of failing. So what we're looking to do is restructuring some of that investment dollars and restructuring how those investors are part of the 88 ecosystem as a whole, opposed to like an individual cohort. So that was actually very much inspired by Y Combinator in terms of investing by cohorts, but it's a lot easier to do by cash than doing services. So that's another, like, that's what I was alluding to earlier, right? So even like as a, like, we've encountered situations where we're working with a startup and we work with them for like 2-3 months, and then we realize that the market or something's changed and now we need to pivot. So even though we haven't done any code and any like development, we just had to like redo like their plan.
Oh man.
Right? So when we say that we're going to invest $100,000, like, even from the planning for like the development queue, it doesn't make any sense. So essentially what we do, what we're going to be doing is converting that SPV and then rolling it into 88.
Gotcha.
But,
Wow.
But fortunately, that was with a very close network of friends that love what we're doing and just wanted to invest. And so that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, why we, what I was talking about in terms of VCs and investors that really love our model, but thinks that we're a little bit too early, too large, and extract a lot of value for ourselves, is the reason why we're not looking to do a significant raise. So yeah.
Okay. It's honestly, I think, quite fascinating, because these are like just structural and logistical issues that you just come across trying to create this kind of investment vehicle. And it, I think if you're not familiar with this space, it just looks very simple from the outset, that, oh, you just throw money into companies and that's just how it's going to go. But there's so many just moving pieces that you're talking about that just complicate a lot of the issues. Yeah. And we haven't, like, this is 88 Ventures. We haven't even talked about like your own angel investing, where you're an investor in Pulp and Press Juice, you're an investor in Myo Detox. You also have like a movie studio, like what's it called? McAlpine Studios, and you're also a partner of like Cha Time Bubble Tea, which I guess is like also like a separate thing. Yeah. And you mentioned how you got into angel investing while you were at Northern Commerce, and that kind of did spark that. Oh yeah, I missed that early stage startup stuff. Like, that's actually more interesting. How did it all kind of come about? Like, how did you get involved into this angel investing to begin with? Did people come to you and say, hey, can you help us with digital marketing? And you start just throwing them cash while you help them with digital marketing? How does it happen?
There's definitely a bit of that with the marketing agency. But the other opportunities really came from my involvement with Propel. So essentially, Western University has a entrepreneurship program for students. It wasn't around when I was in school, but shortly after, it started a program called Biz Inc. started, and then that evolved to Propel. So essentially, it's a program that works with student entrepreneurs that want to start companies. So there are business analysts, there are employees that are actually hired to work with student entrepreneurs. So I was fortunate enough to be able to join them as an advisor and mentor. I was able to evaluate companies that would actually get grants. So like $15,000 grants for a student to work in their accelerator. I was able to judge in different competitions where there's cash prizes. So that was something that I really, really, really enjoyed. And as I was able to connect with more business individuals, people that are working in different startups, I was able to advise them, and just I was able to enter more of a multi, I guess, like serial entrepreneur kind of like persona, as I was able to get into more companies. So some of the investments that I've made in the beginning were very small, like a few $1,000s, but it was really more about the individual versus like the actual company. And then as I became more sophisticated in terms of investing and understanding how to evaluate, how to look at companies, then and then when I was writing larger, bigger checks, then that was like more of a learning opportunity. So it's, as much as I love and like in terms of like how much I know about startups and venture, again, it's all been self-taught, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So how many investments have you made in total so far?
In terms of like actual like cash investments, I'd probably say a dozen.
Okay. And how many are still alive?
All of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I have equity positions in a lot more companies where I join as an advisor, or companies that are people that I know that are very established, where they want me for my expertise in digital marketing and different other skills that I've learned along the way in terms of branding and more of the tech side. Then I have opportunity, like I have equity positions in those companies. That's more like a founding like member. I'm relatively hands off. So I think I have an equity position in about 20 companies.
Wow. And so would you say that most of them come from inbound? Like they're just referrals that come to you and say, hey, can you come and advise my company? Or do you constantly have like a practice of reaching out to different businesses and finding, oh, this company is interesting, I want to invest in it?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty much all organic.
Wow.
Because as an individual investor, it's not like I have like an unlimited like war chest. So a lot of the companies that I invest into are either like colleagues or friends of mine that are invested into a company, or they're starting a company, and I know them individually. I can trust to know that they have my best interest in mind, or they have a good product. There's only been a couple of companies where I didn't really know the startup, and I invested in those companies. But for the most part, they've been pretty organic.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Like it's something that I've been very curious about to understand like how I can like definitely get involved in like the angel investing space. But it just seemed like a black box until you like get into that sphere to actually generate that organic kind of traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I'm not actively looking for a whole bunch of companies or deals. It's not like I'm part of a venture capital firm where my sole purpose is to invest and find the highest potential companies. I think as an angel investor, like I've invested in companies where I have a personal interest in that brand, or it's something that I want to use or something I want to be a part of. Then it's not necessarily numbers first. There are companies, just most recently there was a company where they're doing extremely well. They're very like profitable. They're fast growing, but it's in a really boring industry. Like I have no interest or passion for it. So then, like, even though it may make financial sense, I decline that only because I want to be involved with companies that I'm actually excited to be a part of, right? So whether right or wrong, as an individual private investor, those are things that I've kind of decided on. But that's why I think like with 88 or maybe down the road, like I would really love to be part of a more like formal venture capital environment. Then that would also be like very fun and very different, because like every day you're just assessing different companies or meeting with lots of great high potential entrepreneurs. But I don't do that at that velocity at this point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. Unfortunately, we're kind of coming to the end of the interview, so I have many more questions to ask, but I'll try to just narrow it down to just the kind of closing questions. But I know that you are a big proponent of building brands, like building. We talked in our previous conversations about the power of like Supreme and the kind of visions you have of creating companies that have like lasting impact, and just kind of, if you say like a name like Nike, just like pops into your mind, like just do it, things like that. So for you, like if you were to kind of envision like a 10-year future where, let's say, the money and all that's taken care of, what would you like to achieve, and what do you really envision?
I think 10 years from now, if I just wanted to do what I love, I would love to be able to work with social enterprises and social entrepreneurs. I think like you're talking about impact, and I think sustainability is like a super critical like issue that a lot of companies need to be more mindful of. So I would say that like I want to be able to build more companies, build more brands, and get involved with companies that have social purpose.
Nice.
Yeah.
And if we were to look back and look at the 20-year-old Larry in third year Western, you might still be the teller then. If that Larry were to look at what you're doing right now, what do you think that Larry would think? What do you think the emotional reaction from that Larry would be? And what advice would you have like to give that Larry?
I think that's a really good question. I think I used to be very, very goal oriented. So I feel as though 20-year-old Larry would actually be very disappointed in myself right now.
Wow.
Yeah, because I think I just turned 31, and I think 20-year-old Larry thought that he would have like private helicopters and yachts and all that kind of stuff. So I think, like, truthfully, I think 20-year-old Larry would have been very disappointed. But it wasn't until like the past few years where I've maybe grown and matured that I think I still think this, but at a much lesser extent, where it's just you just gotta enjoy the ride and take your time and be patient. So I think what I would tell myself is not putting that pressure and just enjoy and learn and develop, because I think I had probably a very unhealthy balance or like lifestyle, like quality of life in terms of like just working like crazy. Like I still do that now, but like I actually enjoy the work that I'm doing. But whereas before, even if I didn't like it, like I would just crush like 16-hour days.
Wow.
Right. So, and I did that for a very long time, and constantly pushing, and then like making certain sacrifices that I maybe shouldn't have made. So that's probably what I would tell myself.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, that's a good one. Like I find, no, I definitely haven't done to extent of I believe like you would have done, since I haven't been an entrepreneur for a very long time. But I can only imagine from my own experience that you have to crush it, but there are many times when you're just miserable.
Mm-hmm.
But you just tell yourself you shut the fuck up and just crush it.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely points where you just have to do it, right? But I can definitely remember different situations where I had the option of not doing it, but I just chose to do it. It's just putting a lot of pressure on myself, and then being much more like more real materialistic. And I think just as over time, like whether it's being older or whatever it is, I think there are certain things that I still appreciate, and there's certain goals that I still want to be able to achieve, but it's much less vain.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, like this has been a very fun interview for me, and I really think our listeners would get a lot of value from like hearing your story as well. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, this is so much fun, and this was great, and I hope I can come back sometime.
Yeah. And so if the listeners want to get in, like learn more about 88 Ventures, what's the site that they should go to?
It's 88 EIGHTY number 8.co.
Got it. All right. Thanks a lot for coming to the podcast.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please check out other episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date for the future episodes. Also, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, whichever is applicable to you. To see past episodes, you can go to oldmandan.com/podcasts. Also, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter on my blog, oldmandan.com/newsletter. You can stay up to date with future podcast episodes that way, and included in the newsletter are my book reviews I write, my weekly article related to the domain of self-development systems, as well as 7 things I learned throughout the week on being healthy, wealthy, and wise. Finally, special thanks to icons8.com for allowing me to use their music, Tiny People, on the podcast. Great. I will see you all next time. Take care.